Here's when a housing market cracks, when property taxes rise faster than rents. That's when investors stop buying, listings stack up, and price cuts start. Property taxes are supposed to be the quiet part of owning a home, the line item you account for, the cost that stays in the background while you focus on your mortgage rate, your neighborhood, and the long-term value of the property. But in a growing number of US cities, property taxes are not quiet anymore. They are loud enough to change what buyers can afford, loud enough to force price cuts, loud enough to trap homeowners who want to move but can't because their total monthly payment is no longer competitive, loud enough to push investors to the exit when the rent math stops working. And here's the key point. This isn't theoretical. This shows up in listings and buyer behavior, in escrow recalculations and rent negotiations, and in the number of people who decide they'd rather rent, relocate, or downsize than keep absorbing annual increases. This is not about politics. It's about basic affordability and basic incentives. When the tax bill grows faster than wages and faster than rent growth, the market responds. It responds with slower sales. It responds with higher inventory. It responds with concessions. And in the hardest hit places, it responds with a kind of slow housing damage that looks like normalizing on paper but feels like constant pressure in real life. Because most people don't buy a home based on the sticker price. They buy it based on the monthly payment. And property taxes are one of the most underrated forces inside that monthly payment. If you want more housing market breakdowns that focus on the real costs, the costs that actually hit your bank account, subscribe to ACROSS US4. Now we're counting down 10 US cities where property taxes are actively reshaping the housing market. Not someday, right now. Before we start, here's the framework to keep in your head. There are three numbers that matter in housing decisions: the purchase price, the interest rate, the total monthly payment, and property taxes attack the third number. They don't care that your mortgage rate is locked. They don't care that you refinanced in 2021. Taxes reset anyway. And when they reset, the homeowner doesn't get a vote. That creates a special kind of risk, especially for guys who think in terms of control, predictability, and building a stable base. When taxes are unpredictable, ownership starts to feel less like an asset and more like a contract with moving terms. Let's get into it. Number 10, Detroit, Michigan. Detroit is a city where property taxes can become brutal because of a simple dynamic. When home values are lower compared to other major metros, the tax rate has to do more work to fund services. That can create an unusually high effective tax burden relative to the home's value, especially on regular working households. In Detroit, the housing market is not just about what a house costs. It's about what it costs to keep the house. A buyer can see a low purchase price and think, finally, something I can afford. Then escrow runs the full numbers and the story changes. Principal and interest might be manageable, but taxes and insurance can take that affordable home and turn it into a payment that feels too close to what you'd pay in a more expensive city. That gap between what buyers expect and what the monthly reality becomes is where the damage starts. Detroit has a second factor that makes taxes hit harder: uneven neighborhood conditions. Vacancy, aging infrastructure, and inconsistent service outcomes create a trust problem, and trust is a hidden variable in real estate. When people feel they're paying a lot and not seeing improvements, you get a psychological break. Buyers become skeptical. Investors demand higher returns to compensate. Sellers realize they can't price homes. Like a boomtown when the yearly tax bill is eating the affordability. So what does it do to prices? It doesn't always cause a dramatic crash. It creates a ceiling. Homes that should move quickly become hard to sell at the price sellers want because buyers are doing the math. Principal, interest, insurance, plus a tax bill that can feel too large relative to the house itself. That combination narrows the buyer pool. Watch for the signals. More listings mentioning tax appeals. More sellers offering credits to offset escrow. More investors focusing on cash-only deals because financing plus taxes squeezes the margin. More houses sitting longer even when the list price looks cheap compared to other cities. In Detroit, property taxes damage the market by turning lower purchase prices into higher than expected monthly payments. And that breaks the promise that a cheaper house automatically means an easier life. Number 9, Newark, New Jersey. Newark isn't just dealing with high regional housing costs. It's dealing with one of the nastiest affordability squeezes in America because property taxes in parts of New Jersey can consume a serious share of household income. Here's what makes Newark unique. A lot of buyers show up looking for a more affordable alternative to Manhattan and the broader New York market. They see the purchase price and feel relief. Then they see the property tax bill, and the relief disappears. That changes buyer behavior in a very specific way. It pushes people towards smaller homes, condos, or cheap properties that often come with hidden maintenance problems. It also reshapes the rental market because landlords pass us taxes through. When taxes rise, rents try to rise. When rents hit resistance, investors sell. That's how taxes shape both ownership and rentals at the same time. Newark also sits inside a development tension. When a city is trying to grow its tax base, it leans on large projects, apartment construction, redevelopment zones, major investors. But if assessments reset sharply, or the tax structure feels unpredictable, buyers and developers price in more risk. More risk means less aggressive buying. Less aggressive buying means slower momentum. Slower momentum means weaker pricing power. And then the city leans harder to protect revenue, tightening the cycle again. For homeowners, the most painful moment is usually the escrow recalculation. A buyer might close with a payment that feels barely manageable, then taxes adjust, escrow resets, and the payment jumps. That's not a minor inconvenience. That's the difference between stability and constant stress. Watch 4. Rising inventory in the same property, types that were hot during the boom. Price cuts that appear after weeks on market, not immediately. Buyers negotiating harder for credits, not because they're cheap, but because they're trying to cushion future tax jumps. Property taxes damage this market because they erase the price advantage that draws buyers in, and they inject uncertainty that makes households cautious. Number 8, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Milwaukee is a strong example of how property taxes can squeeze a market even when prices aren't the highest in the country. The pain comes from the relationship between 3 things: the home's value, the buyer's income, and the size of the tax bill. When the tax line item is heavy, it stops being background noise and starts controlling the deal. Many buyers shop Milwaukee expecting the lower purchase price to make ownership easier. Then escrow runs the full monthly cost and the story flips. Principal and interest might look fine, but taxes lift the payment closer to what you'd pay in much pricier metros. That narrows the buyer pool and pushes demand toward smaller homes, units with lower total monthly costs, or nearby municipalities where the tax burden feels more predictable. Milwaukee also shows how taxes create a timing trap. If assessments rise or levies rise, payments reset upward even when the owner did nothing. That fear changes buyer behavior. People stop stretching. They negotiate harder. They walk away faster even after they loved a showing because they're not just buying a house. They're buying a future payment they don't fully control. The damage shows up in market behavior. Listings sit longer because buyers compare monthly payments, not list prices. Sellers offer closing credits to soften escrow. Investors get cautious because taxes eat cash flow, especially when rent growth slows. Watch 4. More listings bragging about low taxes like it's a luxury feature. More buyers pushing for credits tied directly to escrow. More households choosing nearby alternatives even when they prefer the city because the monthly payment feels safer elsewhere. Milwaukee can still attract buyers, but taxes force everyone to demand a better deal. Number 7. Aurora, Illinois. Aurora sits in a Aurora state where property taxes are a constant headline. And Illinois buyers have learned something the hard way. Even if the purchase price looks attractive compared to coastal markets, the long-term cost of ownership can climb faster than expected. Aurora is commuter-oriented, family-oriented, stability-oriented. Most buyers here aren't chasing luxury. They're chasing predictability. And that's exactly why property taxes hit so hard. When taxes rise, it feels like the core promise of suburban ownership is being broken. People buy a house in the suburbs because they want a stable base, schools, routine, commute, a plan. When the tax bill grows faster than income, the plan starts to wobble. Here's the damage mechanism. When taxes rise faster than home values, owners feel punished for staying, buyers feel punished for buying, and sellers realize the buyer pool is shrinking because each year the monthly payment becomes less competitive relative to renting or moving. Aurora also competes with other suburbs for the same buyer. When multiple towns offer similar homes, similar schools, and similar commute patterns, buyers compare tax bills directly. In that environment, the city with a heavier burden has to adjust through price. Not always a collapse, a slow repricing. A home that would have sold quickly now needs concessions, credits, or a lower price to offset the tax reality. And after enough deals get done that way, it becomes the new normal. Watch 4. More tax appeal conversations becoming mainstream among homeowners. Listings highlighting recent tax outcomes to reassure buyers, as is softness in mid-tier inventory, as first-time buyers only purchase if the price drops low enough to buffer future increases. Aurora is where property taxes damage the market by undermining predictability, the number one thing suburban buyers value. Number 6, Chicago, Illinois. Chicago is one of the clearest examples of how property taxes can reshape an entire urban market because the pressure shows up in almost every segment. Single-family homes, condos, two flats, investor properties, and it hits each one differently. Chicago buyers face a layered cost stack, property taxes that can rise with assessments, condo HOA fees that can increase as building costs rise, insurance that doesn't stay still, and a rental ceiling that landlords can't break. When you stack all that together, the market starts to behave differently. Taxes also influence where demand goes inside the city. If taxes rise faster in one area than another, buyers don't just accept it, they shift. That creates uneven outcomes. Some neighborhoods stay stable, some get flooded with inventory, some see deeper cuts. The city starts acting like multiple markets at once. There's also an emotional factor. People tie the tax bill to service quality. When residents believe they're paying more without seeing improvements in safety, schools, transit, and infrastructure, taxes become a reason to exit. And exit pressure matters. If more households decide to leave for suburbs or other states, demand softens and pricing power fades. The biggest damage mechanism in Chicago is monthly payment shock. When taxes rise, escrow rises. The payment becomes less competitive. Buyers don't want to feel like they're sprinting just to stay in place. So they pull back. And when bidding intensity drops, you get fewer, multiple offers. When multiple offers disappear, prices stop climbing. When prices stop climbing while costs keep rising, the market feels stuck. Watch for listings sitting longer even in decent neighborhoods. Buyers pushing hard for credits, especially condos with high HOA fees. Investor pullback in areas where taxes make rent margins too thin. Higher end properties taking longer because buyers compare Chicago to other metros where the full monthly burden is lower. Chicago isn't being destroyed by one thing. It's being squeezed by a cost structure that makes ownership feel less rewarding over time. Number 5, Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore is a direct example of how a high property tax rate can distort a housing market. When the tax rate is significantly higher than nearby jurisdictions, it becomes a relocation incentive all by itself. Buyers don't need a spreadsheet to understand it. They compare monthly payments and decide. Baltimore has homes that look affordable on the purchase price. That should attract buyers. But if the property tax bill is high enough, the monthly payment can look similar to a more expensive home outside the city. That destroys the value proposition. Baltimore also has a second issue. Uneven neighborhood conditions create hesitation. Buyers want confidence the city is improving. When they see high taxes alongside visible signs of struggle, they assume future costs could rise even more. That assumption reduces demand. And here's where homeowners get trapped. A resident wants to sell, but the buyer pool is thinner because buyers know the tax burden. So the seller cuts price to compensate. But cutting price may not be enough if the buyer is still focused on total monthly cost. That creates stagnation and forced discounting. For investors, the math can get ugly fast. If property taxes rise and rents can't rise at the same pace, margins collapse. When margins collapse, investors sell. When investors sell, inventory rises. And when inventory rises in a city already dealing with demand concerns, prices soften further. Watch for listings that emphasize abatements, incentives, or special programs signaling the market needs policy tools to offset taxes. Buyers choosing nearby counties even if they prefer city living. A widening mismatch between the number of homes listed and the number of qualified buyers willing to absorb the monthly cost. Baltimore shows that when property taxes are far above regional norms, they don't just reduce affordability, they become a structural barrier to recovery. Number 4, Portland, Oregon. Portland is a city where property taxes can harm the market in a way that surprises people because many assume the biggest issue is just the sale price. But taxes and local levies add up. And when households already feel pressure from broader living costs, utilities, insurance, everyday expenses, taxes become the tipping point. Portland also has a West Coast dynamic that matters. Buyers are sensitive not just to the total cost, but to whether that cost feels worth it. When households perceive a gap between what they pay and what they get, service quality, safety, infrastructure, It reduces willingness to buy at current prices. That's not ideology. It's value perception. Migration patterns matter here too. When a city sees slower inflow or loses households, the market loses demand. If demand slows while public costs remain high, governments still need revenue. The burden can shift onto remaining owners. That's when taxes become more painful. In real market terms, Portland tax pressure shows up as buyer pickiness. Buyers demand condition. They demand location advantages. They demand proof that the property will hold value. Homes that would have sold quickly in a hotter cycle sit longer when buyers are thinking about the total monthly stack. Portland also has an investor layer in some neighborhoods. When taxes and costs rise while rents flatten, landlords slow down or sell. That adds supply. Watch for longer days on market, sellers offering concessions earlier, buyers moving outward to suburbs where the tax structure feels more predictable. Higher priced homes slowing the most because buyers at that level have the flexibility to choose another metro entirely. In Portland, taxes damage the market through affordability, but also through confidence. When confidence drops, buyers stop stretching and prices stop holding. Number 3, Austin, Texas. Austin is a city where buyers used to tolerate high costs because the growth story felt unstoppable. But property taxes in Texas work differently than many newcomers expect. There's no state income tax, but property taxes can be heavy, and appraisal increases can push payments higher quickly. In Austin, the damage comes from speed. When home values rise fast, assessments often follow. That creates a tax bill that jumps even if the owner did nothing. For a household that already stretched to buy, that jump can be the difference between comfort and stress. It also changes buyer psychology. Buyers aren't budgeting for today. They're budgeting for the next reassessment. They're asking, if this payment is tight now, what happens when taxes reset? That fear changes what people feel safe paying. It reduces bidding intensity, even if they still like the city. Austin also has a new build and suburban expansion layer. When the market cools, builders offer incentives that lower effective monthly payments for new buyers. Meanwhile, existing owners may still be carrying higher taxes based on past valuations. That makes resale homes less competitive. It creates friction in the market. Austin also has a strong investor and renter presence. If taxes and insurance rise, landlords must charge more. But rent growth doesn't go up forever. When rent growth stalls, investors pause. When investors pause, demand falls. When demand falls, prices soften. Watch for more homeowners talking about tax protests and appraisal appeals. Buyers shifting to smaller homes or farther out areas because core monthly payments got too high. More listings from recent buyers who now feel trapped by the total cost. Austin proves that even in a high-demand city, property taxes can be the force that breaks the stretch buyer. And when enough stretch buyers disappear, the market reprices. Number 2, Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland is a city where property taxes can damage the market in a way that feels especially unfair because purchase prices often look like a bargain at first glance. Buyers come in thinking a lower home price means a lighter monthly payment. Then escrow runs the real numbers, and the tax bill changes the entire affordability picture. Cleveland sits in a county where property tax pressure has become more visible as reassessments and higher bills hit homeowners. When assessments reset higher, buyers don't just worry about the mortgage, they worry about next year. That fear changes demand. People stop stretching. They offer less. They demand credits. They walk away faster when the payment looks unstable. The damage also shows up in household behavior, not just market stats. When taxes rise faster than wages, more owners fall behind. Delinquencies increase. That adds a second layer of pressure: forced sales, vacant homes, distressed listings that need work. In a market that depends on payment-sensitive buyers, even small tax increases can knock out a large slice of demand. Cleveland also has a regional comparison problem. Buyers can move a short distance and land in a different tax situation and school structure. When buyers can lower tax exposure by choosing nearby areas, the city has to compete through price. That's how taxes cap the market, not with one dramatic crash, but with slower sales, more reductions, and a growing gap between seller expectations and buyer reality. Watch for listings highlighting taxes as a selling point because buyers are filtering for it. Buyers asking for credits tied to escrow, not repairs. Homes sitting longer even when list prices look reasonable because the decision is being made on monthly cost, not sticker price. Number 1, Providence, Rhode Island. Providence is a city where property taxes can become the deciding factor that freezes the market. Because the tax bill hits buyers at the exact moment they're already stretched by higher monthly payments. Many people look at Providence as a more affordable alternative to bigger Northeast metros. The purchase price can look reasonable. Then escrow reveals the full monthly cost, and property taxes erase the advantage. What makes Providence stand out is how quickly taxes can neutralize the value story. When a household compares Providence to nearby towns and nearby states, the comparison isn't the list price. It's the total monthly stack: mortgage, insurance, utilities, and the tax bill. Once taxes push that monthly number too high, buyers do one of three things: buy smaller than planned, demand a discount, or step back and rent longer. Providence also has a housing stock reality that makes taxes feel heavier. Many homes are older and require ongoing maintenance. Buyers aren't just budgeting for the payment, they're budgeting for repairs, heating costs, and ongoing upkeep. High taxes on top of that makes buyers selective and less willing to stretch. That pushes sellers into reductions, especially for homes that don't feel updated or move-in ready. For investors, tax pressure changes the rent math. If taxes rise while rent growth slows, margins get thinner. Some investors stop buying, some sell. When investor demand weakens, the market loses a major source of competition, and inventory takes longer to clear. Watch for the signals that taxes are driving the slowdown. More listings bragging about low taxes as a feature. More buyers asking for credits tied to escrow instead of repairs. More price cuts that show up after weeks on market as sellers realize the tax burden is narrowing the buyer pool. Providence shows how a tax-heavy monthly payment can turn a workable housing market into one that feels stuck, even when people still want to live there. Property taxes damage housing markets in different ways. In some places, they create monthly payment shock. Your mortgage stays the same, but your escrow jumps and your budget gets tighter overnight. In other places, taxes erase the value advantage. That brings buyers in. A home that looks cheaper on paper becomes expensive in real life. In other places, taxes break investor math. When rent growth can't keep up with rising costs, investors sell, supply rises, and prices soften. And in cities where residents feel the tax burden isn't matched by results, property taxes become a migration driver. People move. And when people move, everything changes demand: pricing power, inventory, and the entire tone of the market. If you want a part two, either a different set of cities or a deep dive on one state, subscribe to across.us4.